Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here. Today, we are unpacking a topic that completely dominates pop culture, sparks absolutely fiery debates all over social media, and touches on some of our deepest psychological wiring. Yep, we're talking about age gap relationships. We're going to look past the gossip and structurally break down the science, the psychology, and those hidden power dynamics that are always at play. It's a truly fascinating journey, so let's just get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. I mean, we've all seen the headlines, right? Pop culture practically runs on this dynamic. You've got Taylor Swift's iconic lyrics in Red, pointing to her past relationship with Jake Gyllenhaal, a guy almost a decade older. You've got Leonardo DiCaprio's incredibly well-documented dating history, where he, famously never seems to date anyone over 25. And as this quote from the Fordham Ram perfectly points out, legally speaking, these are consenting adults. But societally, something often feels, well, kind of weird to people. Why is that? Are we all just being judgmental? Or is there an actual, genuine psychological foundation for our collective hesitation?
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll hit the pop culture hook, the data and science, the 25-year brain myth, power and manipulation, emotional maturity, and wrap up with the equality wheel. Let's do it.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the pop culture hook, looking at Hollywood and perception. So Hollywood has heavily normalized this older man, younger woman dynamic, often reducing young women to essentially paparazzi arm candy. But public perception is actually incredibly nuanced. Research by Dr. David Ludden reveals something super fascinating here. Society actually frowns upon both the older man, younger woman pairing and the reverse, the so-called cougar-cub relationship. But interestingly, when participants evaluated these relationships, they only viewed the older man dynamic as an unequal power relationship. Why? Well, Dr. Ludden points to benevolent sexism. It's the societal assumption that an older man is seducing or taking advantage of an innocent younger woman, while a younger man with an older woman is just presumed to know exactly what he's getting into.
All right, let's move beyond the Hollywood red carpets and get into Section 2, data and science. What do the numbers actually say?
Globally, the reality looks like this. According to a massive study across 130 countries, the global average age gap in heterosexual relationships is exactly 4.2 years, with the man typically being older. But, and this brilliantly illustrates the nuance, that number masks some huge regional differences. Over in North America, the average gap is just 2.2 years. In Gambia, it jumps to almost 15 years. So while these extreme age gaps are what make the front page of the tabloids, the statistical norm is actually a pretty modest gap.
But here's where the science gets absolutely wild. There was a 2010 Danish study tracking longevity, and it found that for men, having a younger partner literally extends their lifespan. I'm serious. Men with wives 15 years younger had a 4% reduced chance of dying compared to other men. That's likely due to a mix of positive emotional effects and having someone to care for them later in life. But for women, the exact opposite is true. Women live the longest when they partner with someone their own age. The biological and caregiving dynamics heavily favor the older male in these scenarios.
Which brings us to a crucial argument that gets weaponized online constantly. Section 3, the 25-year brain myth, diving into biology and development.
We hear this literally all the time on social media. The brain isn't fully developed until you're 25. People use this to argue that anyone under 25 couldn't possibly consent to an age gap relationship. The origin of this idea comes from Jay Gidd's foundational 1999 study, which showed the prefrontal cortex, the part handling impulse control and long-term planning, is one of the last areas of the brain to mature. But as the scientific literature points out, biology doesn't have an alarm clock that magically rings on your 25th birthday. The 25-year mark is an average, not some hard, impenetrable biological boundary. Plus, brain development is vastly influenced by environmental factors, life experiences, and neurodivergence. A 20-year-old who has had to care for younger siblings and work full-time might honestly have a very different maturity level than a heavily sheltered 30-year-old.
So if chronological age isn't the ultimate red flag, what actually is? Section 4, power and manipulation, the dark side. Now, this is the darker side of the debate, and it's highlighted by relationship experts like Kate London. We usually associate grooming with minors, but adult grooming is very real. It happens to vulnerable young adults who are seeking guidance or maybe security from a more authoritative, established figure. It usually starts with excessive attention and gifts, but slowly, the older partner leverages their financial stability and their life experience to create an intense, undeniable power asymmetry. The younger partner doesn't just fall in love, they become systematically dependent.
Dr. Stemper lays out the exact red flags of this toxic dynamic.
An older partner might use controlling behavior, deliberately isolating the younger person from their friends and family. They might use emotional blackmail or gaslighting, basically using their superior life experience to distort the younger person's reality, telling them they're just naive or immature. And this is absolutely vital to understand, especially when we contrast clinical frameworks with modern internet culture. You know that shock masculinity content out there? The stuff that glorifies isolating a partner and dominating every decision as being an alpha or a real man? Yeah, well, clinical experts call that exactly what it is: manipulation and control. It's not genuine strength, and it's certainly not emotional security. It's insecurity, loud and clear.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, where we pivot from the problem to the solution: emotional maturity, the real indicator. So the crucial point here is understanding the difference outlined by therapist Figs O'Sullivan. Emotional intelligence, that's just a cognitive skill. It basically means you know all the right therapy buzzwords. But emotional maturity, that is an embodied capacity. It's your actual ability to handle a spike in stress, to regulate your nervous system when you are angry, and most importantly, your ability to repair a rupture after a fight. You can date someone 20 years older than you who is incredibly financially successful, but if they stonewall you, yell at you, or blame you every single time there is conflict, they are emotionally immature. Chronological age simply does not guarantee emotional capacity.
O'Sullivan provides a brilliant, totally actionable framework for real maturity, and he calls it the RAVE method. Look, when a fight breaks out, both of your nervous systems get thrown into survival mode. You literally cannot solve a problem logically when your brain thinks it's being chased by a bear. So you use RAVE to co-regulate. You reflect back what your partner's feeling, you accept their emotional reality, you validate that their experience makes sense to them, and only then do you explore solutions. Doing this takes actual real discipline and emotional strength. It is a stark clinical contrast to the yelling and reactive behaviors constantly pushed in that shock content we talked about.
Let's look at what this healthy dynamic actually looks like in practice. Section 6, the equality wheel, a balanced partnership. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how clearly it maps out the behaviors of a balanced partnership. Adapted from the Duluth model, it acts as the exact visual opposite of power and control. Notice the focus areas here: economic partnership, shared responsibility, negotiation, and fairness, kind and assertive dialogue. It honestly doesn't matter if your partner is 5 years older or 15 years older. If your relationship lives inside this wheel, it is healthy. This wheel represents genuine strength. True masculinity, true strength, requires two adults who are secure enough to share power, rather than one person demanding absolute authority over the other. Which leaves us with a final, really vital question for you to reflect on. In your own life, regardless of any age gaps, are you building a dynamic of power, or are you building a dynamic of equality? Are you demanding control, or are you actively cultivating mutual respect? Because the science and the psychology are crystal clear. Chronological age is ultimately just a number, but emotional maturity and shared power, those are the true foundations of lasting love. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope these frameworks help you view relationships through a sharper, more empowering lens. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.